Quiet, or they'll kill you. The words brushed against Elena's ear before she even saw his face, before she understood why her body had been yanked off the forest path and pressed into the cold, narrow space between two towering pines. Her breath caught hard, chest rising too fast, too loud. A hand covered her mouth, firm but not cruel, holding her still as the world outside them shifted. Footsteps. Dozens. Heavy boots crushing leaves, snapping twigs under weight that carried purpose. She froze, every instinct screaming to run, yet the man behind her didn't move. He didn't even breathe the way she expected. His chest remained steady against her back, solid, controlled, like the storm circling them had no claim over him. Elena squeezed her eyes shut, trying to quiet the pounding in her chest. They were close. Too close. She could hear low voices cutting through the night air, sharp and urgent, searching. She couldn't have gone far. Another voice followed, colder, more certain. Find her scent. Her stomach twisted. Of course they would. They always did. Her scent had never been like the others, never soft or fading like an Omega's should be. It lingered. It betrayed her. The hand over her mouth tightened just slightly, as if sensing the panic rising in her chest. Then his head dipped closer. His breath grazed her temple, warm against chilled skin. Stay still. The command was quiet, almost a whisper, yet something in it rooted her in place stronger than fear ever could. She didn't understand why she obeyed. She should have fought, should have pushed him away and run. Instead, she stayed. The footsteps slowed, paused. For a moment, the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Elena felt it then. Not sound, not movement, something heavier. The air changed. Pressure settled over her shoulders, subtle yet undeniable, like the weight before a storm breaks. The men outside went silent. No orders, no movement, just silence that stretched too long. Her fingers curled against her own arms as the realization crept in, slow and sharp. They weren't searching anymore. They were hesitating. Behind her, the stranger shifted slightly, not loosening his hold, just adjusting. Enough that she felt the full line of his body. Strong, unyielding. He wasn't hiding from them. He was waiting. Moments ago no longer looked like hunters. They looked uncertain, careful. One of them cleared his throat, but the sound fell flat, swallowed by the tension stretching between them. Your Majesty. The words came out low, almost hesitant, and the man who spoke kept his eyes fixed on the ground. Elena's heart stumbled over itself. Your Majesty. The title echoed louder than any shout. She turned slightly, just enough to look up at him again, to confirm what her instincts were already screaming. Alpha King Rowan Blackthorn stood beside her, close enough that she could still feel the warmth of him at her back, close enough that her pulse refused to settle. He did not acknowledge the title immediately. His gaze stayed forward, steady and unreadable, as if the entire scene unfolding meant nothing to him at all. Yet the air around him said otherwise. It pressed outward, invisible yet absolute, demanding space without a single word. The men shifted again. One took a step back. Another lowered his head further, shoulders tightening as though bracing for something they could not see. Elena swallowed, her throat dry. She should step away. That thought came sharp and urgent. She should create distance, show respect, prove she understood her place now that she knew who he was. But her feet did not move. Something held her there, something deeper than fear. Rowan moved first. Not quickly, not abruptly, just a single step forward, placing himself fully between her and the others. The motion was simple, almost casual, yet it carried a finality that settled over the clearing like a quiet command. You were searching for someone, he said. His voice was calm, even, but it did not invite conversation. It ended it before it could begin. The men hesitated. Elena saw the flicker of conflict cross one of their faces, the struggle between whatever orders had sent them into the forest and the reality now standing in front of them. We did not realize she was under your protection. The words felt careful, chosen with precision, as if each one had been weighed before spoken. Elena's breath caught. Under his protection. The phrase wrapped around her in a way that made her chest tighten. No one had ever said anything like that about her. Not in her entire life. She lowered her gaze instinctively, unsure what to do with the sudden shift, with the way everything around her had changed without warning. Rowan did not look back at her. He did not need to. You realize it now. It was not a question. The man nodded quickly, relief and tension mixing in his expression. "Yes, Your Majesty." Another silence followed, shorter this time, less uncertain. The kind that came when decisions had already been made. Rowan inclined his head slightly, a gesture so minimal it almost went unnoticed, yet it carried the weight of dismissal. "Then you may leave." No one argued. No one lingered. The men stepped back, one after another, retreating into the trees with a speed that had nothing to do with fear of the forest. Within seconds, the sound of their presence faded, swallowed by distance and darkness. Elena remained where she was, rooted to the ground as the reality of what had just happened settled over her in slow, disbelieving waves. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. Quieter, heavier. Without the others there, the space between them seemed to narrow again, though neither of them had moved. She exhaled slowly, the breath trembling despite her effort to steady it. "I did not know." The words slipped out before she could stop them, soft and uncertain. She trailed off, unsure how to finish, unsure what she was even trying to say. Rowan turned then. Not fully, just enough that his gaze found hers. Up close, the silver in his eyes was impossible to ignore, catching the faint light like something alive. Elena felt it again. That strange pull she could not explain, something that reached deeper than instinct and settled somewhere she had never been able to name. "You were not meant to," he said quietly. The answer did not explain anything, yet it felt final, like a door closing on questions she did not yet understand how to ask. He studied her for a moment longer, his expression unreadable, then his gaze shifted slightly, as if noticing something she could not see. "They will not be the last to look for you." The words sent a chill through her, sharp and immediate. Elena's fingers curled at her sides. "Why?" The question came out before she could stop it, driven by a need she could not silence anymore. Rowan's gaze returned to her, steady, measuring. For a brief second, something flickered there. Not hesitation, not doubt, something closer to recognition. "Because," he said, his voice lowering just enough to feel personal, "you do not belong where they think you do." The forest seemed to lean in again, listening. Elena's breath caught as the meaning settled over her, unfamiliar and unsettling. Before she could respond, before she could even decide what she felt, he stepped past her, the movement smooth, deliberate. "Stay close," he added, not looking back this time. Not asking. The command hung in the air between them, quiet but absolute. And without understanding why, Elena followed. Elena did not realize how far they had walked until the forest changed. The dense trees began to thin, the ground smoothing beneath her feet as if the land itself had been shaped by something older than time. She kept a few steps behind him, careful, quiet, matching his pace without being told again. The night air felt different here. Still cool, still touched with pine and damp earth, yet something deeper lingered beneath it. Power. Not loud, not overwhelming, just present, like a steady pulse beneath the surface of everything. Rowan did not look back to check if she followed. He did not need to. Every step he took carried certainty, as if the path ahead had already been decided long before she stepped into it. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from the strange awareness settling under her skin. The further they moved, the quieter her thoughts became. The fear that had driven her through the forest faded, replaced by something she could not name. It was not safety. Not exactly. It was something sharper. Something that made her feel seen in a way she had spent her entire life avoiding. "Where are we going?" she asked softly, her voice breaking the silence, but not disturbing it. Rowan slowed, just slightly. Not enough to stop. Enough to acknowledge the question. "Somewhere they will not." "Follow," he replied. The answer was simple, yet it carried layers she could not fully understand. Elena frowned faintly, glancing over her shoulder even though she knew no one was there anymore. "They were afraid of you," she said, the realization still settling into her chest. Rowan's steps did not falter. They were cautious. The correction came smoothly, almost absent of emotion. Elena studied him from behind, trying to reconcile the man who had pulled her into the shadows with the king who could silence a group of hunters without raising his voice. "That is not the same thing," she murmured. For a moment, she thought he might ignore it. Then, unexpectedly, he let out a quiet breath, something close to amusement though it never reached his expression. "No," he said, "it is not." The path opened ahead into a small clearing, ringed by tall stones that rose from the earth like sentinels. Moonlight poured through the open sky above, casting soft silver across the ground. Elena slowed as she stepped into it, her gaze lifting instinctively. The space felt different, not just because it was open, but because it felt untouched, undisturbed, as if nothing uninvited could cross into it. Rowan stopped near the center. For the first time since they left the trees, he turned fully to face her. The shift in his attention was immediate. Elena felt it like a change in gravity, subtle yet impossible to ignore. She hesitated at the edge of the clearing, unsure if she should move closer or remain where she was. "You can come forward," he said, his tone calm, not commanding this time. The difference caught her off guard. Slowly, she stepped closer, each movement measured, cautious. The ground beneath her feet felt warmer here, almost faintly alive. She stopped a few feet away from him, close enough to see the details she had missed before. The sharp line of his jaw, the stillness in his posture, the way his eyes did not waver once they found hers. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with things unspoken. Elena shifted her weight slightly, her fingers tightening at her sides. "Why did you help me?" The question came out quieter than she intended, but it held more weight than anything she had said before. Rowan watched her for a long moment, not evaluating, not judging, just watching, as if the answer mattered more than the question itself. "You were in danger," he said finally. It was not enough. She knew it. He knew it. Elena shook her head faintly. "That is not why." Her voice steadied, even as her heart picked up again. "There were others you could have helped, others who would matter more." Something shifted in his gaze then, not visible to anyone else, not something she could fully define, but it was there. A subtle change, like a door opening just slightly. "You believe that," he said. Elena held his gaze, refusing to look away this time. "It is true." Rowan stepped closer. Just one step. It was enough to close the distance between them, enough that she felt the warmth of him again, stronger now without the chaos of the forest around them. "No," he said quietly. The single word landed deeper than she expected. Elena's breath caught, her chest tightening as something unfamiliar stirred beneath the surface. Rowan's eyes held hers, unwavering, certain. "It is what you have been told." The clearing seemed to grow quieter around them, the world narrowing to the space between them. Elena's thoughts scattered, unable to hold on to anything solid. For the first time, doubt crept into something she had always accepted as fact. Before she could respond, before she could even decide what to say, Rowan's gaze shifted slightly, not away from her, but through her, as if sensing something beyond what she could perceive. His expression sharpened, not with concern, but with focus. "They are still watching," he said softly. Elena's heart dropped, the fragile calm breaking instantly. "I thought you said, they will not come closer," he interrupted, his voice steady. "Not here." The certainty in his tone settled something inside her, even as tension returned to the edges of her thoughts. She glanced toward the trees surrounding the clearing, her senses straining, but she saw nothing. No movement, no figures, only shadows. Rowan stepped back slightly, though his presence did not lessen. "This place is protected," he added. Elena looked at him again, searching for answers she did not yet have the courage to ask. "And me?" she whispered before she could stop herself. Rowan held her gaze, the silver in his eyes catching the moonlight once more. For a brief second, something unspoken passed between them. Not a promise. Not yet. But something close. "You are not what they think," he said. The words lingered in the air, quiet but undeniable. Elena stood there, caught between what she had always believed and what was slowly beginning to change. And for the first time in her life, she did not know which one was true. The silence did not break, but it shifted. Elena felt it first in her chest, a faint tightening that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with awareness. The kind that made her senses stretch beyond what she could see. She glanced toward the tree line again, slower this time, trying to understand what he had meant. Watching. The word lingered in her mind like a shadow that refused to take shape. "I do not hear anything," she said quietly, almost to herself. Rowan did not look toward the trees. His attention remained on her, steady, unwavering. "You would not," he replied. There was no judgment in his tone, only fact. That should have unsettled her more than it did. Instead, it sparked something else. A question she had never allowed herself to ask. Elena took a small breath, then another, grounding herself in the moment. Then how do you? She asked. Rowan's gaze softened, though only slightly, like the edge of something sharp being turned just enough to avoid cutting. Because I have learned to listen to what is not meant to be heard. The answer did not explain. Not fully, but it felt honest in a way that made her stop pushing for more. For now, a faint breeze moved through the clearing, brushing against her skin, carrying that same subtle warmth beneath it. Elena frowned slightly, lifting her hand without thinking. The air felt different here. Thicker, almost. Not heavy, just present. Like something unseen existed between each breath. This place, she murmured, more to herself than to him. It feels alive. Rowan watched her carefully now, as if that simple observation mattered more than anything else she had said. It is, he answered. Elena's hand lowered slowly, her gaze drifting across the clearing again. The stones surrounding them did not look carved. They looked grown, as if the earth itself had shaped them for a purpose long before she arrived. A quiet realization settled over her. This was not just a place to hide. It was a place meant to protect. Her chest tightened again, but this time it was not fear. It was something closer to disbelief. Why bring me here? She asked, her voice steadier now, though the question carried more weight than before. Rowan did not answer immediately. He stepped slightly to the side, his gaze shifting toward the center of the clearing where the moonlight gathered strongest. Because this is where truth is harder to ignore, he said at last. Elena stilled. The words settled deep, stirring something she had spent years keeping buried. She shook her head faintly, almost instinctively. I do not understand. Rowan looked back at her, his expression unreadable, but his presence felt closer now, more focused. You are not meant to. Not yet. The answer frustrated her more than she expected. A flicker of something sharp crossed her expression before she could hide it. Then why say anything at all? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Rowan did not react with annoyance. If anything, something quieter passed through his gaze. Recognition, perhaps. Because you are already beginning to notice, he said. Elena opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, she stood there, caught between the certainty of his voice and the confusion building inside her. Notice what? That was the question pressing at the edges of her thoughts. That something about her did not fit the story she had been told her entire life. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides, tension building again, though not from the forest or the unseen watchers beyond it. This came from within. All I have ever been told is that I am nothing special, she said quietly, the words heavier than she expected once they were spoken out loud. Rowan's gaze sharpened, not in anger, but in focus. And you believed it? It was not a question. Elena looked down for a moment, her throat tightening. What else was I supposed to believe? She asked softly. Silence followed, but it did not feel empty. It felt deliberate. Rowan stepped closer again, closing the small space she had not realized still existed between them. The movement was slow, giving her time to step back if she wanted to. She did not. What you were told was convenient, he said, his voice low, steady. Convenient for those who did not want to understand what you are. Elena's head lifted sharply at that, her breath catching as his words sank deeper than anything before them. Not who. What. The distinction mattered. More than she was ready to accept. That does not make sense, she said, though her voice lacked the certainty it had held before. Rowan held her gaze, unyielding. It will. The confidence in his tone left no room for doubt, even if she did not share it yet. The breeze shifted again, softer this time, carrying a faint warmth that brushed against her skin like a whisper. Elena stilled, her attention snapping back to the sensation. It was not coming from the air. It was coming from her. A faint glow brushed across her fingertips, so subtle she might have missed it if she had not been looking directly at her hands. She froze. What? The word barely formed before she stopped, her breath catching again, sharper this time. Rowan did not look surprised. That was what unsettled her the most. He stepped closer, his gaze dropping briefly to her hands, then lifting back to her face. That, he said quietly, is why they are watching. Elena stared at her own hands, the faint warmth still lingering, impossible to ignore now that she had felt it. Her heart began to race again, but not from fear of the forest or the hunters who had chased her. This fear was different. It came from the realization that something inside her was changing, or perhaps revealing itself. She lifted her gaze slowly to meet his again, her voice barely above a whisper. What am I? Rowan held her gaze, the silver in his eyes steady, certain. And for the first time, there was no hesitation in his answer. Someone they should not have underestimated. Elena could not look away from her hands. The faint glow had faded, but the warmth remained, pulsing softly beneath her skin like something newly awakened. She flexed her fingers slowly, uncertain, almost afraid that if she moved too fast it would disappear or worse, grow stronger. Her breath came shallow, uneven, as her thoughts struggled to keep up with what she had just felt. This was not possible. Nothing about this made sense. Omegas did not do this. They did not carry something that felt alive. That was not real, she whispered, more to herself than to him, as if saying it out loud might make it true. Rowan did not respond immediately. He watched her, not with concern, not with surprise, but with a quiet certainty that unsettled her more than anything else. It was, he said finally. The simplicity of his answer left no space for denial. Elena shook her head, stepping back slightly, creating distance she had not needed before. No, she said, stronger this time, though her voice still wavered at the edges. I would have known. Rowan's gaze followed her movement, steady, patient. You would have been told, he corrected. The words landed differently this time. Sharper. Elena stilled, her breath catching again. That was the second time he had said something like that. Not that she was wrong, but that what she believed had been shaped, controlled. Her chest tightened as something unfamiliar pushed against the wall she had built around herself for years. Why would anyone hide something like this? She asked, her voice quieter now, but no less intense. Rowan stepped forward again, closing the space she had tried to create, not forcefully, just enough that she could not ignore his presence. Because power that is not understood is often feared, he said. Elena swallowed, her throat dry. And fear makes people do things they believe are necessary. She searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for anything that suggested he might be wrong. There was none. Only certainty. Only quiet conviction that refused to bend. Her thoughts spiraled, trying to piece together fragments of her past, moments that had never quite made sense. The way others avoided her. The way her scent lingered longer than it should. The way she had always felt different. Not weaker, just misplaced. Her fingers curled again, the warmth flickering faintly, as if responding to her thoughts. She froze, staring at her hand as the sensation returned, subtle but undeniable. It is happening again, she said, her voice barely above a breath. Rowan's gaze dropped briefly, then lifted back to her eyes. You are letting yourself feel it. Elena shook her head quickly. I am not doing anything. Exactly, he replied. That answer unsettled her even more. She had spent her entire life controlling herself, staying quiet, staying small, avoiding attention. Now he was telling her that doing nothing was the very thing allowing this to surface. The realization sent a ripple of unease through her chest. Then how do I stop it? She asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Rowan did not answer right away. He studied her, as if weighing something she could not see. You do not, he said at last. The words hit harder than she expected. Elena took another step back, her pulse quickening again. That is not an answer, she said, a hint of frustration breaking through the confusion. Rowan's expression did not change. It is the only one that matters. Silence fell between them again, heavier this time. Elena's thoughts raced, searching for something solid to hold on to, something that made sense in a world that suddenly felt unfamiliar. If they know, she said slowly, piecing it together. If they have been watching, her voice trailed off, but the implication hung in the air. Rowan nodded once, subtle but certain. They will come again. The words sent a chill down her spine, colder than anything she had felt since entering the clearing. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, not from the temperature, but from the weight of what that meant. And you? She asked, her gaze lifting to meet his again. Will you stay? The question was quieter than anything she had said before, but it carried more weight than all the others combined. Rowan did not look away. He did not hesitate. Yes. The answer came without pause, without condition. Something in her chest shifted at that. Not relief. Not entirely. But something steadier than the fear that had followed her through the forest. Elena exhaled slowly, her shoulders easing just slightly as the tension loosened its grip. She looked down at her hands again, the warmth still there, no longer frightening in the same way. Still unfamiliar, still dangerous in ways she did not understand, but no longer something she wanted to push away completely. "Then tell me," she said, lifting her gaze back to him, her voice steadier now, stronger despite everything. "If I cannot stop it, what am I supposed to do with it?" Rowan stepped closer one more time, closing the distance fully now, his presence steady, grounding. His gaze held hers, unwavering, certain. "You learn," he said quietly. The words settled between them, simple, yet filled with meaning she had yet to uncover. Elena stood there, caught between fear and something new, something that felt dangerously close to possibility. And for the first time, she did not look away. Elena held his gaze, the single word echoing in her mind long after he said it. Learn. It sounded simple, almost too simple for something that had already begun to unravel everything she thought she knew about herself. She drew in a slow breath, steadying the rhythm of her thoughts, then let it out just as carefully. "I do not even know where to begin," she admitted, her voice quieter now, but no longer uncertain in the same way. Rowan did not move away. If anything, his presence felt more anchored, as if he had already decided he would not leave this place until she understood at least the first step. "You begin by not fighting it," he said. Elena frowned slightly, her fingers curling again at her sides as if the memory of that warmth might return simply by thinking about it. "That is not something I have ever been good at," she replied. The corner of his expression shifted, subtle, almost unreadable, but there was something there now that had not been before. Not softness, not quite, something closer to recognition. "You were not meant to be," he said. The answer lingered, and she realized it was not criticism. It was explanation. She looked down at her hands again, hesitating this time before lifting them slightly, palms facing upward as if expecting something to appear. Nothing happened. Just her skin, pale in the moonlight, unchanged. A small breath left her, half relief, half disappointment. Rowan watched her carefully. "You were waiting for it," he said. She glanced up, caught off guard. "Should I not?" His head tilted slightly, just enough to show he was considering how to answer. "It does not respond to expectation," he said. "It responds to you." That only confused her more. "That does not make sense." "It will," he repeated, patient in a way she was not used to. Elena exhaled slowly, forcing herself to relax her shoulders, to stop bracing for something she could not predict. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to escape, but to focus, to listen, the way he had said he did. At first, there was nothing, just the distant sound of wind moving through trees, the faint rhythm of her own heartbeat. Then, slowly, something shifted. Not outside, inside. A faint warmth returned, subtle as before, but clearer now that she was not resisting it. It moved through her like a quiet current, not overwhelming, not demanding, just present. Elena's breath caught, her eyes opening as she looked down at her hands again. This time, the glow did not appear, but the warmth stayed, steady, real. "I can feel it," she said, the words barely more than a whisper. Rowan did not react with surprise. Only a slight nod, as if this had always been expected. "Good." She let out a small, unsteady laugh, the sound soft and disbelieving. "Good," she repeated. "That is all you were going to say?" There was a hint of something lighter in her tone now, something that had not been there before. Rowan's gaze held hers, calm, grounded. "It is more than you have ever allowed yourself before," he said. The truth in that settled deep. Elena lowered her hands slowly, her thoughts shifting again, not spiraling this time, but moving with more clarity than before. "If this has always been there," she said carefully, "then why now?" Rowan's expression sharpened slightly, not with tension, but with focus. "Because you were pushed to the edge of what you believed you were," he answered. Elena stilled, the memory of the forest rushing back. The fear, the running, the moment she had thought there was nowhere left to go. Her chest tightened again, but this time she did not push the feeling away. She let it settle, let it exist alongside the warmth still lingering beneath her skin. "So it only appears when I am in danger?" she asked. Rowan shook his head once. "No, it appears when you stop denying it." The distinction mattered, more than she wanted to admit. Elena looked away briefly, her gaze drifting toward the stones surrounding the clearing. For years, she had done exactly that. Denied anything that set her apart. Made herself smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. Now she was being told that the very thing she had hidden was what made her different. What made her worth noticing. The thought was unsettling, and yet not entirely unwelcome. She looked back at him, her expression more steady now. And what happens if I cannot control it? The question was not driven by fear this time, but by something closer to responsibility. Rowan met her gaze without hesitation. Then you learn faster, he said. The answer was simple, but it carried weight. Elena exhaled slowly, absorbing it, letting it settle into something she could hold on to. She nodded once, more to herself than to him. For the first time since this began, she felt like she was standing on something solid, even if she could not yet see where it would lead. The clearing remained quiet around them, the unseen watchers still lingering beyond its boundary, but no longer pressing in the same way. Elena lifted her chin slightly, her posture shifting in a way so subtle she almost did not notice it herself. Less guarded, less small. Rowan observed the change without comment, though something in his gaze acknowledged it. Stay here, he said after a moment, his voice calm but firm. Elena blinked, caught off guard by the shift. Where are you going? She asked. Rowan turned slightly, his attention moving toward the edge of the clearing where the shadows gathered thickest. To remind them, he said, his tone quiet but absolute, that you are not alone. Elena's breath caught, not from fear, but from the weight of what that meant. She watched him take a step toward the edge of the clearing, his presence sharpening again, becoming something the forest itself seemed to recognize. And for the first time, she did not feel like something being hunted. She felt like something being protected. Elena did not follow him. She stayed exactly where he had told her, though every instinct urged her to move closer, to not let him step too far into the shadows alone. The clearing felt different the moment he shifted away from her. Not unsafe, not broken, but altered, as if the balance of something unseen had tilted slightly. She wrapped her arms around herself again, not out of fear this time, but to hold on to the steady warmth still lingering beneath her skin. It had not disappeared. That alone felt like a quiet victory she did not fully understand yet. Her gaze followed Rowan as he reached the edge of the clearing, where the moonlight faded and the darkness thickened between the trees. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. Each step carried the same quiet certainty she had begun to recognize. The forest responded to him in ways she could not explain. The air shifted. The silence deepened. Even the shadows seemed to settle, as if acknowledging his presence without resistance. Elena took a slow breath, focusing inward the way she had just learned. The warmth responded almost immediately, faint but steady, like a pulse she could now recognize as her own. It spread gently through her hands, her arms, not overwhelming, just present. She held on to it, not forcing it, not questioning it, just allowing it to exist. Beyond the clearing, something moved. Not visible, not clear, but there. Elena felt it before she saw anything, a subtle tension brushing against her senses like a distant echo. Her breath caught, her focus shifting outward again. Rowan stopped just before the boundary where the clearing ended. He did not cross it. Instead, he stood there, still and silent, facing into the darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, figures began to emerge between the trees, not stepping fully into the light, just enough to be seen, enough to show they were there. Elena's chest tightened, but she did not step back. Not this time. The difference surprised her. The fear was still there, lingering at the edges, but it no longer controlled her movements. It did not send her running. It did not silence her thoughts. She stayed where she was, her attention fixed on Rowan's back, on the way he did not move, did not react with urgency or aggression. He simply stood. The figures in the shadows did not come closer. They did not speak. Yet the tension between them and Rowan filled the space like a held breath. Elena felt it again, that shift in the air, the same one from earlier, but stronger now. Not directed at her, directed at them. Rowan's presence expanded, not physically, but in a way she could feel, like a quiet force pressing outward, drawing a line that could not be crossed. She did not need to hear his words to understand what he was saying. This far, no further. One of the figures shifted, just slightly, as if considering something, as if testing the boundary without stepping over it. Elena's heart picked up, but she held onto the warmth inside her, grounding herself in it. Rowan did not move. He did not need to. The stillness itself became the message. After a long moment, the tension began to ease. Not disappear, just loosen. The figures in the shadows stepped back, one by one, retreating deeper into the trees until they were no longer visible. The forest exhaled. The air lightened. Elena released a breath she had not realized she had been holding. Rowan remained where he was for a few seconds longer, as if ensuring the message had been understood completely. Then he turned, his gaze finding her again across the clearing. Even from a distance, she felt it. That same quiet certainty. That same unspoken reassurance. He walked back toward her, unhurried, the tension fading with each step he took away from the trees. By the time he reached her, the clearing felt whole again, balanced in a way that was difficult to describe. Elena looked up at him, her expression no longer uncertain, though questions still lingered beneath the surface. They listened, she said. Softly. Rowan's gaze held hers. They understood, he corrected. Elena considered that, then nodded slowly. There was a difference. A meaningful one. She glanced toward the trees again, but this time her attention did not linger there. It returned to him, to the space between them, to the warmth still present beneath her skin. You did not even have to say anything, she added, a quiet note of disbelief in her voice. Rowan's expression remained calm, but there was something steadier in it now, something that felt almost grounded in her presence rather than separate from it. Some things do not require words, he said. Elena held his gaze, letting that settle, letting the silence stretch without discomfort. For the first time, it did not feel like she was standing in someone else's world. It felt like she had stepped into something that might one day belong to her too. She lowered her gaze briefly, then lifted it again, more certain this time. Then teach me, she said. The request came without hesitation, without doubt. Rowan studied her for a moment, as if measuring the shift in her tone, the change in her posture, the quiet strength that had not been there before. Then he gave a single nod. I will, he said. And for the first time since the forest had closed in around her, Elena felt something stronger than fear. She felt ready. Elena did not realize when the fear had fully left her. It was not sudden. It did not disappear all at once. It simply faded, replaced by something steadier, something that held her in place instead of pushing her to run. She stood in the center of the clearing, the moonlight brushing over her shoulders, and for the first time in her life, she did not feel like she needed to disappear. Rowan remained close, not crowding her, not guiding her physically, yet his presence shaped the space around her in a way that made everything feel grounded. Real. Again, he said quietly. The word was not a command. It was an invitation. Elena glanced down at her hands, hesitation flickering for only a moment before she let her shoulders relax. She remembered what he had said. Do not force it. Do not expect it. Just feel. She closed her eyes. Slowly, drawing in a steady breath. The night air filled her lungs, cool and clean, but beneath it, she sensed something else. Not outside. Within. That same warmth returned, stronger this time, more responsive now that she recognized it. It moved through her like a quiet current, no longer unfamiliar, no longer something to fear. Elena's fingers shifted slightly, her focus narrowing as she followed the sensation instead of resisting it. The warmth gathered, not in one place, but everywhere at once, like it had always been part of her and was only now being acknowledged. Her breath slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. The world around her seemed to soften at the edges. When she opened her eyes, the glow was there. Faint, subtle, but undeniable. It traced along her fingertips like a soft reflection of the moonlight, except it did not come from above. It came from her. She stared at it, not in fear this time, but in quiet disbelief. I am doing it, she whispered. Rowan's gaze did not leave her. There was no surprise in his expression, only quiet approval, as if this moment had always been waiting to happen. You are allowing it, he corrected gently. The distinction settled into her thoughts, reshaping the way she understood what she was seeing. Elena took a careful step forward, testing herself, testing the feeling. The glow did not flicker. It stayed with her, steady, responsive. She exhaled softly, a small, almost disbelieving smile touching her lips before she could stop it. It does not feel wrong, she admitted. Rowan's expression shifted slightly, something softer passing through his gaze. It was never meant to. Elena lowered her hand slowly, though the warmth remained, no longer fading as quickly as before. It stayed, like something she could reach for now instead of something that came and went without her control. She looked at him, a new question forming, quieter but deeper than the ones before. Then why did it feel wrong before? Rowan held her gaze, his answer coming without hesitation. Because you were taught to see it that way. The words landed gently, but their meaning ran deep. Elena felt it settle into her chest, shifting something fundamental, something she had never questioned until now. She glanced down at her hands again, then back at him, her expression more certain than it had been just moments ago. If I can do this, she said slowly, choosing her words carefully, then what else have I been told that is not true? Rowan did not answer right away. He stepped closer, closing the space between them once more, not imposing, just present. That is something you will have to decide for yourself, he said. Elena nodded slightly, understanding that this was not something he could simply explain. It was something she would have to see, to feel, to question. The clearing remained quiet around them, but it no longer felt like a place of hiding. It felt like a beginning. She turned her gaze toward the trees, toward the darkness beyond where the watchers had been. For a moment, she considered how different she felt now compared to when she had first run into the forest. She had been afraid, small, certain that she had nowhere to go. Now, that certainty was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Possibility. Elena drew in a steady breath, then let it out slowly. They will come back, she said, not as a question, but as a realization. Rowan nodded once. Yes. She did not look away from the trees. And next time, I will not run. The words surprised even her, but once spoken, they felt right. Solid. Rowan watched her closely, something in his gaze sharpening again, not with concern, but with recognition. No, he said quietly. You will not. Elena turned back to him, the faint glow still lingering at her fingertips, no longer something she tried to hide. Then I need to be ready, she added. Rowan's expression did not change, but the air around him seemed to shift again, responding to the quiet resolve in her voice. You will be, he said. Elena held his gaze, and for the first time, she believed it. Not because he said it, but because something inside her had already begun to agree. And in the silence that followed, the forest no longer felt like a place she needed to escape. It felt like a place that was beginning to recognize her. The forest did not move, yet everything felt different. Elena stood in the clearing, the faint glow at her fingertips slowly fading into a quiet warmth that no longer frightened her. It did not vanish. It settled, like something that had found its place. She drew in a steady breath, her chest rising with a calm she had never known in moments like this. No panic, no instinct to hide, only awareness. Rowan remained beside her, close enough that she could feel the quiet strength of his presence without needing to look. It no longer overwhelmed her. It steadied her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, not empty, but full of something unspoken, something that had shifted between them since the moment he pulled her into the shadows. Elena turned her gaze toward the edge of the clearing again. The darkness was still there, just as deep, just as unknown. But it no longer felt like it was closing in. It felt like it was waiting. She exhaled slowly, her fingers relaxing at her sides. This is only the beginning, she said, her voice quiet but certain. Rowan did not hesitate. Yes. The single word carried weight, not as a warning, but as a truth neither of them could avoid. Elena nodded once, more to herself than to him. She could feel it now. Not just the warmth inside her, but something larger. A shift in the way the world responded to her. The way the air seemed to recognize her presence. The way the silence no longer pressed against her, but moved around her. It was subtle, almost impossible to explain, but it was real. She turned to face him fully, her expression no longer uncertain. Then I will not waste it, she said. Rowan's gaze held hers, steady, measuring. For a brief moment, something deeper passed through his eyes. Not doubt, not hesitation, something closer to approval. No, he said quietly. You will not. The certainty in his voice did not feel like expectation. It felt like belief. Elena held on to that, letting it settle into the space where fear had once lived. The clearing seemed brighter now, though the moon had not changed. Or maybe she had. She glanced down at her hands one last time, half expecting the glow to return. It did not, but she knew it would. When she allowed it, when she needed it. That knowledge alone was enough. She lifted her gaze again, meeting his without flinching. What happens when they realize they cannot ignore me anymore? She asked. The question was not driven by fear. It was driven by understanding. Rowan's expression sharpened slightly, his presence shifting in a way that reminded her of the moment he had stepped into the shadows to face the Watchers. Then they will come not as hunters, he said, but as something far more dangerous. Elena felt the weight of that, but it did not shake her. Not the way it would have before. And you? She asked again, quieter this time, though the meaning had not changed. Rowan stepped closer, closing the last bit of distance between them. The air shifted, not with tension, but with something steadier. Something that felt like a line being drawn, not against her, but around her. I do not leave what I choose to protect, he said. The words were simple, direct, yet they carried something deeper than a promise. Elena's breath caught for just a second, then steadied. She did not look away. She did not question it. She simply accepted it. Not because she needed protection, but because she understood what it meant for him to say it. The forest stirred again, faint, distant, as if acknowledging the shift that had taken place within the clearing. Elena turned her gaze outward once more, toward the path she had run through not long ago. It no longer looked like an escape. It looked like a beginning. She took a step forward, slow, deliberate, not leaving the clearing, just moving within it, claiming the space in a way she never had before. The ground beneath her feet felt steady, familiar, like it had been waiting for her to stand this way all along. Rowan watched her, silent, but present, always present. Elena lifted her chin slightly, her posture no longer guarded, no longer small. The warmth inside her responded, faint but steady, like a quiet agreement. Next time, she said softly, her voice carrying just enough to reach him without breaking the stillness. They will not see the girl who ran. Rowan's gaze did not waver. No, he said. They will not. The truth settled between them, final and unshaken. Elena allowed herself one last breath, deep and steady, before the silence returned fully, wrapping around them like something protective instead of something to fear. And somewhere beyond the trees, beyond the Watchers who had already begun to retreat, the world shifted just enough to take notice. Not of a hunted Omega, but of something it had not expected to awaken. And this time, Elena did not shrink from it. She stepped into it.